change your mind, if you change your mind.
I always view this episode as the type of Lapis and Peridot episode, well, two don't usually get along, but that's mainly the fact that watching this show for the first time while listening to people's critiques centering around the show, 2020 was really not the year for Steven Universe, even though it only aired its future episode in March, while the rest is mainly people critiquing the show. I'm just gonna say this right now that nowadays, people are seeing elements from the show that they can understand a lot more, unlike how they were presented back in 2020. Raising the Bond centers around Steven getting a message from Peridot and Lapis, and they asked him what he did in outer space, which leads to him telling them about the trial he had with Blue and Little Diamond, which really paranoids Lapis to the point that she and Peridot needs to leave Earth in order to have their own lives on the moon in order to avoid the war that's gonna be happening on Earth. Remembering Lapis's development when it came to her episode with Steven in season 3, Same Old World, it really shows that she really wants no part of the whole war situation from Homeworld, to the point that she would probably be in the same position like she was before the events of the show. Mainly her being trapped into a meal and Steven releasing her from the meal in season 1. It sums up a lot that Lapis wants no part of this whatsoever, and when it comes to Peridot, she doesn't want to be part of the war, but at the same time, she doesn't want to leave Earth. Getting into Peridot's development when it came to her arc in the end of season 2, it really shows that she's a completely different person than she was from seasons 1 and 2 before she redeemed herself. I really felt like that whole position on either deciding on leaving Earth is really difficult for her to handle, especially since that by this point things are not looking good for everyone due to what is happening after Steven has returned to Earth from Homeworld. Granted, this episode also centers around the characters finding Pumpkin, who is hiding, which, for me personally, there's nothing wrong on extending the runtime, but believe me, I really felt like that they only did this for the sake of having Peridot understanding what life is like on Earth, especially the conversation that she had with Steven while trying to find Pumpkin. But when it comes to Lapis, considering that she isn't like Peridot or Ruby from Room from Ruby, it really shows that it's difficult for her to be adjusted on Earth, knowing full well that a war is gonna be happening. Like, believe me, if Lapis was a human character and she had to deal with a real war, like World War for example, then she would probably still do the same thing, except that taking the Bond up into space onto the moon, she would just run away or get away from the destination that a war is taking place as far away as possible. Every time I remember those critiques back in 2020, it really made me think that Lapis leaving with the entire bar with her, while leaving Peridot all alone without the Bond, it's mainly her just trying to cope with what she has, considering that it's difficult for her to cope for what she can't have while going on the moon without the Bond. Yes, it is selfish of her by taking the entire Bond while leaving Peridot all alone, but the way I see it, it really shows that she is different like every other gem, and this show has been showing that multiple times. If anything, if she did stay, it wouldn't fit her character at all. Especially since that when it comes to her chemistry with Steven, it's the best out of any of the chemistries that she has, but it wouldn't be worth it to stay on Earth for one person, knowing full well that the war is a lot more bigger than that when it comes to her own safety, which really shows that there's an episode centering around her and Steven later on in this season. These are the prime examples onto why the first half of the season has a great build-up of what has yet to come in the second half. It's just that for how rushed the second half is, I can guarantee you that the production, even though that people have heard about it numerous of times, it was probably a lot worse behind the scenes. If you ask me, the fact that Peridot is trying a lot more in order to handle change, even though that she can't in reality, since that Pumpkin doesn't want to leave, all the while that Lapis is dealing with her own struggles, this episode is a demonstration of how that the relationship just isn't 100% healthy, considering of how there are two different gems. Believe me, the Barmaids episode, for how structured it is, it makes more sense on how that they can't be able to be close with each other in universe. And every time that they're trying to cope with it, it's just difficult for them to move forward due to what's coming their way in the end of the season. Mainly the wedding episode, all the while Change Your Mind. Tomorrow, we're gonna be talking about Back to the Kindergarten, which centers around Peridot, which is her final episode of the series, aside from the future episode that she has with Steven. Believe me, this episode tomorrow sums up a lot that for what Peridot has to offer, she can't be able to move forward due to changes around her and the fact that what happens can't be fixed and you have to move forward, which, you know, honestly is a lesson that we all have to learn, but if we're like Peridot, it's just difficult to do so. I'm giving this episode a 7.75 out of 10.